The autumn rain drummed against the tall windows of Clarence House as Camilla Bowles sat in her private study, fingers drumming impatiently on the mahogany desk. The Queen Consort had spent the morning reviewing correspondence from various royal households, but her mind kept returning to one particular matter that had been bothering her for weeks. The Cartier Halo Tiara. The same delicate diamond piece that had graced Catherine's head on her wedding day to Prince William in 2011. The same tiara that had become synonymous with the Princess of Wales's most important public appearances. The same tiara that Camilla believed should rightfully belong to the senior royal women of the family. Camilla's assistant, Margaret, knocked softly on the door before entering with a silver tea service. "Your Majesty, I've prepared the Earl Grey as requested," she said, setting the tray down carefully. "Thank you, Margaret," Camilla replied, though her tone carried an edge of distraction. "Tell me, what do you know about the protocol surrounding the royal jewel collection?" Margaret paused, clearly surprised by the question. She had worked for the royal household for over 15 years and had seen many internal discussions about jewelry assignments, but this seemed different somehow. "Well, Your Majesty, traditionally the senior female members of the family have first choice of pieces for important events. The Queen Consort typically has access to the most significant items from the collection." Camilla nodded slowly, stirring her tea with deliberate movements. "And what about pieces that have become particularly associated with certain individuals?" The question hung in the air between them. Margaret understood immediately what Camilla was referring to. The Cartier Halo Tiara had indeed become Catherine's signature piece, photographed countless times at state dinners, diplomatic receptions, and formal portraits. But, technically, all royal jewelry belonged to the crown, not to individual family members. "The collection belongs to the institution, Your Majesty. Individual preferences are usually accommodated when possible, but the needs of the monarchy come first," Margaret answered carefully. After Margaret left, Camilla continued to sit in contemplation. She thought about the upcoming state visit from the President of France, one of the most important diplomatic events of the year. As Queen Consort, she would be expected to wear something spectacular, something that would photograph beautifully and send the right message about British royal tradition and elegance. The Cartier Halo Tiara would be perfect. Its delicate scrollwork and brilliant diamonds would complement the state dinner gown she had already selected. More importantly, wearing such a recognizable piece would establish her authority within the family hierarchy. It would send a clear message about who held the senior position among the royal women. That evening, Camilla mentioned her thoughts to King Charles during their private dinner. They sat in the smaller dining room at Clarence House, away from the formality of official staterooms. Charles was reviewing briefing papers for his upcoming Commonwealth meetings, but he looked up when Camilla began speaking about the jewelry arrangements for the French state visit. "I've been thinking about the tiara selection for next week," she said, cutting into her roasted chicken with practiced elegance. "The Cartier halo would be absolutely perfect for the occasion." Charles paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. He had been married to Camilla long enough to recognize the tone in her voice. This wasn't a casual suggestion, it was a carefully considered request with deeper implications. "Darling, isn't that Catherine's usual choice?" he asked gently. "She's worn it to several important events recently." "That's exactly the point, Charles," Camilla replied, her voice gaining strength. "As your wife and the Queen Consort, I should have access to the finest pieces in the collection. Catherine has other beautiful options available to her." The king set down his utensils and looked directly at his wife. He could see the determination in her eyes, the same look she had worn during their courtship when facing public criticism, and later when navigating the complex process of joining the royal family officially. Camilla had fought hard for her position, and she wasn't going to let anyone, even family members, overshadow her role now. "I understand your perspective," Charles said slowly. "But, you know how attached Catherine has become to that particular piece. It was her wedding tiara, after all." "Wedding tiaras are traditionally worn once," Camilla countered. "The fact that she's continued to use it for other occasions is unusual in itself. I'm not asking her to give it up permanently. I simply believe that as the senior woman in this family, I should have the option to wear the most beautiful pieces when representing the crown at major international events." Charles found himself in a difficult position. He loved his wife and wanted to support her rightful place as Queen Consort. At the same time, he knew that William and Catherine had strong feelings about certain aspects of royal tradition, including jewelry that held personal significance. The Cartier halo wasn't just any tiara to Catherine, it represented one of the happiest days of her life and had become part of her public identity. Meanwhile, at Kensington Palace, Prince William was reviewing his own preparations for the state visit. As second in line to the throne, he would play a significant role in hosting the French delegation. Catherine would accompany him to the state banquet, and they had already begun coordinating their formal attire for the evening. Catherine had assumed she would wear the Cartier halo tiara, as she had for similar occasions in the past. Her lady-in-waiting had already confirmed the piece's availability and begun planning the rest of her ensemble around its delicate design. The deep blue gown she had selected would complement the tiara's diamonds beautifully, creating the kind of elegant, memorable look that would photograph well for the international press. The first sign of trouble came during a routine call from the palace jewelry coordinator. Catherine was in her private sitting room at Kensington Palace, reviewing seating charts for the state dinner, when her phone rang. "Your Royal Highness," came the slightly nervous voice of Mrs. Henderson, who managed the royal jewelry collection. "I'm calling about the tiara selection for the French state visit." "Yes, the Cartier halo," Catherine replied easily. "I believe everything is confirmed for Tuesday's delivery." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Mrs. Henderson had been dreading this conversation all morning, knowing it would likely create complications within the royal family. "Actually, Your Royal Highness, there's been a request from Clarence House. Her Majesty the Queen Consort has expressed interest in wearing the Cartier halo for the state banquet." Catherine felt her stomach drop. She set down her pen and walked to the window overlooking the palace gardens, trying to process what she had just heard. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" "The Queen Consort's office contacted us yesterday requesting the Cartier halo for the state dinner. As you know, protocol dictates that senior members of the family have priority access to the collection." Catherine closed her eyes, feeling a mixture of disappointment and frustration. The Cartier halo wasn't just any piece of jewelry to her. It held deep personal meaning, representing not only her wedding day but also her growing confidence and role within the royal family. Over the years, it had become her signature piece, the tiara that photographers and royal watchers most associated with her public image. "I see," Catherine said quietly. "And this decision has been finalized?" Mrs. Henderson's discomfort was evident in her voice. "The request comes from the Queen Consort herself, Your Royal Highness. According to protocol, we must accommodate the senior family members first." After ending the call, Catherine sat in stunned silence. She understood the hierarchy within the royal family, but this felt different. It felt personal. The timing seemed deliberately calculated to coincide with such a high-profile event, ensuring maximum visibility for whoever wore the tiara. When William returned from his afternoon meetings, he found Catherine in their private living room, staring out at the garden with an expression he recognized as barely contained frustration. "What's happened?" he asked immediately, crossing the room to sit beside her. Catherine turned to face her husband, her usual composure cracking slightly. "Your stepmother has requested my tiara for the French state dinner." William's expression darkened instantly. "What do you mean, requested your tiara?" "The Cartier halo. Camilla's office contacted the jewelry coordinator yesterday. Apparently, as Queen Consort, she has priority access to any piece in the collection." Catherine's voice remained steady, but William could hear the underlying hurt. William stood up abruptly, running his hands through his hair in a gesture Catherine recognized as his way of controlling anger. "This is unacceptable. That tiara has been yours for over a decade. Everyone knows it's associated with you. According to protocol, it belongs to the crown, not to me personally," Catherine replied, though her tone suggested she disagreed with this interpretation. "Protocol," William said sharply. "This isn't about protocol. This is about establishing dominance." He began pacing the room, his mind racing through the implications. William had always maintained a careful, respectful relationship with Camilla, understanding her importance to his father's happiness. But this felt like a direct challenge to his wife's position within the family, and, by extension, a challenge to their future role as the next generation of senior royals. "She knows exactly what she's doing," William continued. "Choosing the French state visit, one of the most photographed events of the year. Every major newspaper will cover this. She's making a statement." Catherine watched her husband's growing agitation with concern. She knew how protective he was of their family's position and dignity, especially after everything they had been through with media scrutiny and family tensions over the years. "William, we need to handle this carefully," she said. "I don't want to create a family crisis over a piece of jewelry." But William had already made up his mind. "This isn't about jewelry, Catherine. This is about respect. And if she thinks she can simply take what's yours without any discussion or consideration, she's about to learn otherwise." The stage was set for a confrontation that would test the delicate balance of relationships within the royal family, with consequences that none of them could fully anticipate. The next morning brought an unseasonably cold October day to London, with grey clouds hanging low over Buckingham Palace. Inside Clarence's house, Camilla was having her final dress fitting for the state dinner when her private secretary knocked on the door of her dressing room. "Your Majesty, Prince William's office has requested an urgent meeting this afternoon," the secretary announced through the door. Camilla paused, standing perfectly still as her seamstress adjusted the hem of her midnight blue gown. She had been expecting this call. William was known for his protective nature when it came to his family, and she knew her request for the tiara wouldn't go unnoticed or unchallenged. "Did they specify the nature of the meeting?" Camilla asked, her voice carefully neutral. "No, Your Majesty, but they emphasized the urgency." Camilla dismissed her staff and stood alone in front of the full-length mirror. The gown was perfect, elegant, sophisticated, and exactly the kind of ensemble that would photograph beautifully alongside the Cartier halo tiara. She had been looking forward to this moment for weeks, imagining how the combination would establish her visual presence as the senior female royal. But she also wasn't naive about family dynamics. Camilla had spent decades navigating the complex relationships within the royal family, first as Charles's companion and later as his wife. She understood that every action had consequences, and she had calculated the potential pushback from this decision. What she perhaps hadn't fully anticipated was how quickly and directly William would respond. At Kensington Palace, William was preparing for what he knew would be a difficult conversation. He had spent the morning consulting with his private secretary about protocol and precedent, trying to understand the formal rules that govern jewelry assignments within the royal family. What he discovered only increased his frustration. "The truth is, sir," his secretary explained, "there are very few written rules about these matters. Traditionally, jewelry assignments have been handled through discussion and mutual agreement between family members. The Queen Consort does technically have senior status, but, in practice, pieces often remain with the family members who have become associated with them." William absorbed this information while reviewing his calendar. He had 3 official engagements later in the week, a charity board meeting the following morning, and now this unexpected confrontation with his stepmother. The timing couldn't have been worse, with the French state visit requiring everyone's attention and energy. "Schedule the meeting for 3 o'clock, William instructed. "And make sure it's private. No staff, no assistants." Meanwhile, at Adelaide Cottage, Catherine was trying to focus on her correspondence when her phone rang. Her close friend Sophie, the Countess of Wessex, was calling with what sounded like urgent news. "Catherine, I've just heard something rather concerning," Sophie began without preamble. "There's talk among the household staff about the jewelry arrangements for the state dinner." Catherine set down her letter opener, giving her full attention to the conversation. Sophie had always been a trusted confidant within the royal family, someone who understood the delicate balance of relationships and protocols. "What kind of talk?" Catherine asked, though she suspected she already knew. "Apparently, the story about the tiara request is spreading through the palace staff. People are taking sides, Catherine. Some of the older staff members think Camilla has every right to wear whatever she chooses as queen consort. Others feel that your established connection to the piece should be respected." Catherine closed her eyes, feeling a headache beginning to form. The last thing she wanted was for this situation to become a source of gossip and division within the royal household. Palace staff were generally discreet, but internal tensions had a way of eventually reaching the media. "Has anything reached the press yet?" Catherine asked. "Not yet, but you know how these things work. If there's tension between family members, especially around such a high-profile event, someone will eventually talk to the newspapers." After ending the call with Sophie, Catherine made a decision. She couldn't let William face this confrontation alone, and she certainly couldn't allow the situation to escalate into a public relations nightmare. The royal family had worked too hard to rebuild their image and unity after various scandals and controversies over the years. She called William immediately. "I'm coming with you to the meeting with Camilla." "Catherine, you don't need to." "Yes, I do," she interrupted firmly. "This concerns me directly, and I won't hide behind you while you fight my battles. We're a team, remember?" William felt a surge of pride at his wife's determination. This was one of the qualities he most admired about Catherine, her refusal to be intimidated or pushed aside, even when facing uncomfortable family situations. That afternoon, William and Catherine arrived at Clarence's house together. The building felt unusually quiet, with most of the regular staff dismissed for the day to ensure privacy. Camilla received them in the blue drawing room, a formal space that seemed to emphasize the official nature of their discussion. William, Catherine, Camilla greeted them with carefully controlled warmth. "Please, sit down." The three of them arranged themselves around a small seating area, with afternoon tea already prepared on a side table. The formality of the setting felt strange given their family relationship, but everyone understood that this wasn't a casual family visit. "I assume this is about the tiara," Camilla said directly, settling into her chair with the poise of someone who had spent years in high-pressure situations. William leaned forward slightly, his expression serious but respectful. "Camilla, I need to understand why you made this request now, for this particular event, without any prior discussion with Catherine." Camilla had prepared for this question. "William, I hope you understand that my role as Queen Consort comes with certain responsibilities and expectations. The French state visit is one of the most important diplomatic events of the year. I need to present myself in a way that reflects the dignity and tradition of the monarchy. And, you don't think Catherine has been doing that?" William asked, his tone sharpening slightly. "That's not what I said," Camilla replied smoothly. "Catherine has been wonderful in her role. But, I am the Queen Consort now. The senior woman in this family. Surely you can understand that I should have access to the finest pieces in the collection for such occasions." Catherine spoke for the first time since entering the room. "Camilla, that tiara isn't just any piece of jewelry to me. It was my wedding tiara. It's become part of who I am as a member of this family." Camilla's expression softened slightly, but her resolve remained firm. "I understand the sentimental value, Catherine. I truly do. But, we all make sacrifices for the good of the institution. This is simply part of accepting our roles within the hierarchy." William felt his anger rising, despite his efforts to remain diplomatic. "This isn't about hierarchy, Camilla. This is about basic consideration and respect. If you wanted to wear that tiara, you could have discussed it with Catherine months ago, perhaps for a different event. Instead, you waited until a week before the state dinner to make your demand." "It's not a demand," Camilla said, her voice cooling. "It's a request made through proper channels, following established protocol." "Protocol," William repeated, echoing his conversation with Catherine the previous day. "Let me ask you something, Camilla. When my grandmother was queen, did she ever simply take jewelry away from other family members without discussion? Did my mother?" The mention of Diana brought a momentary tension to the room. Camilla's relationship with William had been built carefully over many years, partly by avoiding direct comparisons to his mother. But, William's question was pointed and deliberate. "Your grandmother and your mother dealt with different circumstances," Camilla replied carefully. "The monarchy has evolved, and so have the expectations placed on us." Catherine decided to make one more attempt at finding middle ground. "Camilla, what if we found another solution? There are other beautiful tiaras in the collection that would be equally stunning for the state dinner. The George IV state diadem, for instance, or I've made my choice," Camilla interrupted, her tone final. "The Cartier halo is perfect for the occasion, and, as Queen Consort, I have every right to wear it." William stood up abruptly, his diplomatic facade finally cracking. "Rights," he said, his voice rising. "You want to talk about rights? Catherine has worn that tiara to represent this family at dozens of important events. She's photographed in it, painted in it, and recognized around the world wearing it. And, you think you can simply take it because of your title?" "William, please lower your voice," Camilla said, though her own composure was beginning to slip. "No, I won't lower my voice," William replied, his anger now fully visible. "This is exactly the kind of thoughtless, selfish behavior that damages this family. You're putting your own desires ahead of family harmony, ahead of consideration for others, and ahead of what's best for the monarchy. Catherine reached for William's arm, trying to calm him down, but he continued. Do you have any idea what this looks like? The stepmother taking the daughter-in-law's tiara? The press will have a field day with this story. They'll turn it into a narrative about family conflict and jealousy within the royal family. Is that really what you want for your legacy as queen consort? Camilla stood up as well, her own anger finally showing. How dare you speak to me about legacy? I've spent decades earning my place in this family, fighting for acceptance, enduring criticism and attacks. I won't be lectured by you about what I deserve or what I'm entitled to wear. The confrontation had escalated far beyond what any of them had intended. Years of careful relationship building, diplomatic conversations, and family unity were threatening to unravel over a single piece of jewelry. But, for all three of them, the tiara had become symbolic of something much larger: power, respect, hierarchy, and identity within the royal family. Catherine stood between her husband and stepmother-in-law, realizing that this moment would define family relationships for years to come. The decision about the tiara was no longer just about who would wear it to a state dinner. It was about establishing precedents, drawing lines, and determining how conflicts would be resolved within the family going forward. The tension in the blue drawing room had reached a breaking point when King Charles unexpectedly entered through the side door, having just returned from his afternoon meetings at Buckingham Palace. His arrival immediately changed the dynamic in the room, as all three family members turned toward him with expressions that clearly indicated the heated nature of their discussion. Charles took in the scene quickly, his wife standing rigidly by her chair, William's flushed face and clenched fists, and Catherine's obvious distress as she stood between them. He had been king long enough to recognize a family crisis when he saw one. I could hear raised voices from the corridor, Charles said quietly, closing the door behind him. I think we need to take a step back and discuss this calmly. William turned to his father, his anger still evident. Dad, do you know what's happening here? Camilla has decided to take Catherine's tiara for the state dinner, without any discussion or consideration for anyone else's feelings. Charles looked at his wife, seeking confirmation. Camilla met his gaze steadily, her chin raised in a gesture of defiance that Charles recognized from their early years together. I requested the Cartier halo through proper channels, she said. I didn't realize I needed permission from the family to wear jewelry from the crown collection. You know that's not how this works, Charles replied, his voice carrying the weight of decades of experience with royal protocol and family dynamics. These decisions have always been made through discussion and consensus, especially when personal attachments are involved. Catherine finally spoke, her voice steady despite the emotional turmoil of the afternoon. Your Majesty, I've never claimed ownership of any piece in the collection. But that tiara has been part of my public identity for over 13 years. Taking it away now, especially for such a high-profile event, feels deliberately hurtful. Charles moved to the center of the room, positioning himself where he could see all three family members clearly. As king, he had hoped to avoid these kinds of internal conflicts, but he realized that his leadership was needed now more than ever. Camilla, my dear, he began, addressing his wife directly. I understand your position as queen consort gives you certain privileges. But I also know that you're a thoughtful person who cares about family relationships. What were you hoping to accomplish with this request? Camilla's expression softened slightly at her husband's gentle tone, but her resolve remained firm. Charles, I need to establish my authority in this role. People are watching to see if I'll be pushed aside or treated as secondary to the younger generation. Wearing the most beautiful and recognizable tiara sends a clear message about my position in the family hierarchy. William scoffed audibly. So this is about competing with Catherine? About proving your importance by taking something away from her? It's not about competition, Camilla replied sharply. It's about respect. I've earned my place in this family, and I won't be relegated to second-choice jewelry while everyone else gets the best pieces. Charles raised his hand to prevent further escalation. William, I understand your anger, but shouting at Camilla won't solve this problem. And, Camilla, I think you may be misunderstanding how respect is earned within this family. He walked to the window, looking out at the garden where he had often retreated during difficult family discussions over the years. When he turned back to face the room, his expression was thoughtful but firm. The strength of this monarchy has never come from individual family members asserting their authority over others, Charles continued. It comes from our ability to work together, to support each other, and to put the institution ahead of personal desires. What I'm seeing here is the opposite of that. Catherine felt encouraged by Charles's words and decided to make one more attempt at resolution. Perhaps we could establish some clearer guidelines about jewelry assignments going forward. Something that respects both hierarchy and existing associations with particular pieces. The guidelines are already clear, Camilla interjected. The Queen Consort has priority access to the collection. I shouldn't have to justify my choices or seek approval from junior family members. This statement proved to be the final straw for William. Junior family members, he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. Catherine is the future Queen Consort. She's the mother of the future king. If anyone should have priority access to jewelry, it should be her. The implication of William's words hung heavily in the air. He was essentially arguing that Catherine's future role superseded Camilla's current position, a suggestion that challenged the entire basis of Camilla's argument about hierarchy. Charles felt a chill run down his spine as he realized how quickly this argument was escalating beyond the immediate issue. William, that's enough. Camilla is my wife and your Queen Consort now, not at some future date. And Catherine is my wife, William shot back. The woman who will stand beside me when I'm king. The woman who has dedicated her life to this family and this institution. She deserves better than being treated like she doesn't matter. Camilla's face had gone pale, but her voice remained steady. I never said Catherine doesn't matter. But I am the Queen Consort today, not in 20 or 30 years. My role and my responsibilities are immediate. Catherine decided to try a different approach, addressing Camilla directly with as much diplomacy as she could manage. Camilla, I've always respected your position in this family. When you and Charles married, I welcomed you warmly. I've included you in family events, supported your charities, and tried to be a good daughter-in-law. All I'm asking is for the same consideration in return. For a moment, Camilla's resolve seemed to waver. She looked at Catherine, young, beautiful, beloved by the public, and clearly distressed by this situation. Part of Camilla recognized that Catherine had indeed been gracious and welcoming over the years, never treating her with the hostility that some royal watchers had predicted. But another part of Camilla, the part that had endured decades of criticism and fought for acceptance, refused to back down now. Catherine, I appreciate everything you've said. But this isn't about our personal relationship. This is about my role as Queen Consort and what that means for the future of this institution. Charles recognized that they had reached an impasse. Neither his wife nor his daughter-in-law was willing to compromise, and his son was becoming increasingly agitated. As king, he needed to make a decision that would resolve the immediate crisis while minimizing long-term damage to family relationships. I'm going to suggest a postponement of this decision, Charles announced. We're all too emotional right now to think clearly about the consequences of our actions. Let's take 24 hours to consider our positions and then meet again tomorrow evening. There's nothing to postpone, Camilla replied immediately. The state dinner is in 5 days. I need to finalize my jewelry selection and coordinate with my stylist. William stepped closer to his father, his voice intense but controlled. Dad, if you allow this to happen, you're setting a precedent that will poison family relationships for years to come. Every future jewelry selection will become a power struggle. Every family event will be an opportunity for someone to assert dominance over someone else. Charles found himself torn between loyalty to his wife and concern for his son's warnings. He had worked hard to build bridges between Camilla and his children, and this crisis threatened to undo years of careful relationship building. William, I hear your concerns, Charles said slowly. But I also need to respect Camilla's position as my wife and Queen Consort. What about respecting Catherine's position? William demanded. What about respecting the fact that she's done nothing wrong here except become attached to a piece of jewelry that's been part of her public image for over a decade? Catherine touched William's arm again, trying to calm him. She could see that his anger was approaching dangerous levels, the kind that might lead to saying things that couldn't be taken back. William, please, she said softly. Let's not make this worse than it already is. But William was beyond listening to diplomatic advice. The protective instinct that had driven him to shield his mother from media attacks, that had motivated him to guard his own family's privacy, and that made him fiercely defensive of anyone he loved was now fully engaged. You want to know what I think? William said, addressing both his father and stepmother. I think this is exactly the kind of petty, vindictive behavior that gives the monarchy a bad reputation. I think it's the kind of thing that makes people question whether we deserve the respect and support of the British public. Camilla's composure finally cracked completely. How dare you call me petty and vindictive? After everything I've endured to be part of this family, after all the sacrifices I've made, you're going to stand there and lecture me about deserving respect? The argument had now moved far beyond the Tiara issue and into much deeper territory about family dynamics, acceptance, and the wounds that had never fully healed from the complex history between Charles, Camilla, and Diana's memory. Charles realized that the situation was rapidly spiraling out of control and that decisive action was needed before permanent damage was done to relationships that had taken years to build. The decision he made in the next few moments would define not only who wore the tiara to the state dinner, but how this family would function together for years to come. King Charles stood in the center of the blue drawing room, watching as decades of carefully constructed family harmony threatened to collapse around him. The argument had moved far beyond jewelry and into the fundamental questions of respect, hierarchy, and belonging that had shaped his family's relationships since his marriage to Camilla. He thought about his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, and how she had handled similar family conflicts during her 70-year reign. She had always emphasized duty over personal feelings, institutional stability over individual desires. But she had also understood that the monarchy's strength came from the unity of the family that represented it. "Everyone please sit down," Charles said, his voice carrying the full authority of his position as king. "We're going to resolve this matter now, today, before it does any more damage to this family." William remained standing, his anger still evident, but Catherine moved to one of the chairs, understanding that Charles needed them to listen. Camilla hesitated for a moment before taking her seat, her expression guarded but attentive. "I'm going to tell you all the story," Charles began, settling into his own chair. "When your grandmother was about Catherine's age, she faced a similar situation with the Queen Mother. There was a particular sapphire brooch that had belonged to Queen Victoria, and both women wanted to wear it to a state banquet with the Swedish royal family. He had their full attention now, even William's anger temporarily subdued by curiosity about this previously unknown family history. The Queen Mother, as the senior woman, simply took the brooch without consultation. Your grandmother was hurt, but she said nothing publicly. However, the incident created a rift between them that lasted for months. The press noticed the tension, staff members began taking sides, and the entire royal household became uncomfortable." Charles paused, making sure his words were having the intended impact. "Your grandmother later told me that she regretted not speaking up at the time. Not because of the brooch itself, but because allowing that kind of behavior to go unchallenged set a precedent that hierarchy could be used as a weapon within the family. She said it was one of her few regrets about how she handled family relationships in her early years as queen." Camilla shifted uncomfortably in her chair. She could see where this story was leading, and it wasn't supporting her position as clearly as she had hoped. "Now," Charles continued, "I find myself in the position of having to decide whether to repeat my mother's early mistake or to find a better way forward." William finally sat down, recognizing that his father was trying to find a solution rather than simply taking sides. "Camilla, my dear," Charles said, turning to his wife. "I love you, and I respect your position as queen consort. But I cannot allow this family to be torn apart over a piece of jewelry, no matter how beautiful or symbolic it might be." Camilla's eyes filled with tears, though she fought to maintain her composure. "Charles, if you take her side in this, you're essentially telling the world that I don't matter. That my role as your wife is less important than keeping peace with your son." "That's not what I'm doing," Charles replied gently. "I'm telling you that how we treat each other within this family matters more than any individual decision about jewelry or protocol." He stood up and walked to the window again, gathering his thoughts for what he knew would be the most important words he spoke that day. "Catherine," he said, turning back to face the room. "The Cartier Halo tiara will remain available to you for the French state visit and for future occasions where you feel it's appropriate. Your connection to that piece is recognized and respected by this family." Catherine felt a wave of relief, but she also noticed the pain that flashed across Camilla's face. This wasn't the outcome she had wanted if it meant permanently damaging her relationship with her stepmother-in-law. However, Charles continued, addressing Camilla directly, "I want you to choose another piece from the collection for the state dinner. Something equally beautiful that will establish your elegance and authority without creating this kind of family conflict." Camilla's tears were now visible, though she tried to hide them. "So Catherine gets to keep her tiara, and I get told to make do with something else. How is that fair?" William started to speak, but Charles held up his hand to stop him. It's fair because it prioritizes family unity over individual preferences, Charles said. It's fair because it recognizes that some things are more important than formal hierarchy. And it's fair because it prevents this family from making a mistake that we would all regret for years to come. Camilla stood up abruptly, her composure finally breaking completely. I should have known this would happen. When it comes down to choosing between your first family and me, I'll always come second. That's not true, and you know it, Charles replied firmly. If William and Catherine were demanding something unreasonable, I would side with you without hesitation. But they're not. They're asking for consideration and respect, which are reasonable expectations within any family. Catherine finally spoke, her voice soft but clear. Camilla, I don't want this decision to come between us. The George IV state diadem would look absolutely stunning with your gown for the state dinner. It's more elaborate than the Cartier halo, actually more fitting for the Queen Consort at such an important event. It was a generous offer, an attempt to find face-saving language that would allow Camilla to accept the decision with dignity. But Camilla was too hurt and angry to appreciate the gesture in the moment. Don't patronize me, Catherine, she replied sharply. We all know this is about you keeping your precious tiara and me being put in my place. William's anger flared again. That's enough. Catherine is trying to be gracious, and you're throwing it back in her face. This is exactly the kind of behavior that makes people question your character. William, Charles said sharply. That's completely inappropriate. But the damage was done. Camilla looked at William with an expression of hurt and betrayal that cut through all the diplomatic language and careful relationship building of the past decade. I see, she said quietly. So this is how it's going to be going forward. William thinks he can speak to me, however, he likes because Daddy will always protect his precious son and daughter-in-law. The room fell into silence as everyone recognized that they had crossed a line that might be impossible to walk back from. The argument about the tiara had become a broader conflict about respect, authority, and family dynamics that would have lasting consequences. Charles looked at his family, his wife in tears, his son still angry, his daughter-in-law trying to hold everything together, and realized that his decision, while necessary, had not solved the underlying problems. It had simply forced them into the open where they would have to be addressed directly. We're all going to take some time to calm down, Charles announced. Camilla, I'll speak with the jewelry coordinator about alternatives for the state dinner. William and Catherine, I expect you to act with grace and dignity despite your feelings about how this situation was handled. As they prepared to leave, Catherine made one final attempt to bridge the gap that had opened between them. Camilla, I hope you'll understand that this was never about taking anything away from you. The tiara has personal meaning for me, but your role as Queen Consort is secure and respected. Camilla looked at Catherine for a long moment, and, for just an instant, her expression softened. She could see the sincerity in the younger woman's eyes, the genuine desire to maintain family harmony despite the conflict. I'm sorry it came to this, Camilla said quietly. I hope you understand that I was trying to establish my place in this family, not hurt you personally. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a recognition that both women had been acting from understandable motivations, even if their methods had created unnecessary conflict. William remained silent during this exchange, still too angry to trust himself to speak diplomatically. He had gotten what he wanted, the tiara would remain with Catherine, but the cost had been higher than he had anticipated. As they left Clarence's house that evening, the October air felt crisp and clean after the tension of the afternoon. Catherine walked beside her husband, knowing that they had won this particular battle but unsure about the long-term consequences for family relationships. The French state visit would proceed as planned, with Catherine wearing the Cartier halo tiara and Camilla in the George IV state diadem. The photographs would be beautiful, the diplomatic objectives would be achieved, and the public would see a united royal family representing Britain with dignity and elegance. But, behind the formal smiles and coordinated appearances, the family would carry the scars of this confrontation for years to come. The argument about the tiara had revealed deeper tensions about hierarchy, respect, and belonging that would continue to influence their relationships long after the jewelry had been returned to the palace vaults. William had learned that protecting his family sometimes required him to risk other relationships. Camilla had learned that formal authority meant little without the genuine respect and affection of family members. And Catherine had learned that even trying to avoid conflict didn't always prevent it from finding you. The royal family would continue to function, to fulfill their duties, and to represent the British monarchy with appropriate dignity. But they would do so with the knowledge that beneath the surface of royal protocol and public appearances, they were still human beings struggling with the same issues of power, respect, and family dynamics that affected families everywhere, just with much higher stakes and more public scrutiny.